time for FLALAW, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. We are live with FLALAW on the radio. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you are a faithful listener and you have been listening to us every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. If you are, thank you for joining us once again. But if you are a new listener, welcome. This is FLALAW live on the radio. This is your live legal call-in talk show. And we are live on the air for the next hour talking about legal topics. We do have a specific topic that we are going to be honing in tonight, which I think is interesting because it's that time of year. And so we have our tax law attorney, Alena Miles, who's in the studio with us tonight. And of course, answering all those scary tax law questions. Tis the season, right? So, of course, if you have family members, friends, you yourself personally have tax law questions, this is the night to call in, especially since this is very timely. You're probably getting forms in the mail, getting alerts that your tax forms are ready, and you may or may not know what to do with them. You may have some questions, concerns. So this is a great show to tune into because you can get some very good information off of this show, especially our international listeners, anybody who maybe they're snowbirds, they come in from other places or internationally, and they have tax issues. And this is a good show for that as well. She is fresh off of an international tax law conference. Yay. She came with some amazing information for our listeners. So I'm so excited for tonight's show. I'm going to allow Alena to give her bio, reintroduce herself. When I got here, I said, I haven't seen you since last year. So reintroduce herself to our listeners. If we have new listeners who have not met her or heard of her before, although she has been on the show quite a few times, so that you know who she is, what she does, where she's located. Give us the whole rundown, and then I'm going to go ahead and make sure our streaming platforms are all up and running so that I can give you that information as well as far as where you can tune into the show. So, Alena, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Jacqueline. It's good to see you, and it's good to be here.
Thank you.
My name is Alena Miles, and I am a tax attorney. I am locally based out of Safety Harbor, Florida. And primarily what I do is tax law. And basically, I help taxpayers with penalty notices, any notices from the IRS that they need help with, assistance with. It could be that they owe a lot of tax to the Internal Revenue Service or whatnot. Another thing that I help taxpayers with is international tax matters. And yes, Jacqueline mentioned that recently I went to the International Tax Conference in Miami. It is only held once a year, so I'm excited to go every single year because there is so much new, good, up-to-date information that we all can pick up from that. So, so international tax can be inbound and outbound, could be non-resident looking for IT number to file U.S. tax return, for example, and I'm a certified acceptance agent and I can help them with that. Or it could be outbound, which means a U.S. person that has foreign bank accounts or businesses or whatever else offshore. So, so we can talk about a lot of international tax today, which I'm excited about.
Perfect. Yeah. So this is obviously busy season for you, right?
Yes, it's the beginning of the tax season.
Yeah.
And recently, a lot of people have been calling with the 1099-C form. It's the cancellation of debt form, and they don't know how to go about it because, like, if they
Is this a new form?
It's not a new form, but that's a lot of questions have been spinning around that topic because they don't know what to do with it if they don't think it's taxable. Because technically, you have to include it on the tax return.
I see. Now, before we obviously jump into a lot of the good topics that you bring back from the conference, I did have a question first about the Big Beautiful Bill and if there were any issues that you're seeing right now since January and tax time is kind of popping up that you're seeing is like, this is a new change and people should be aware of this.
Yeah, so that's a very good point, Jacqueline. One of the things that I see is people talk about Trump accounts. Okay, that's a new thing.
I've heard a lot about that. Yeah.
But the thing there is that I don't believe that Trump accounts, if individual makes contributions, I don't believe that they can take advantage of annual gift exclusion. So let me break it down. So like if you gift me $19,000 a year, that's excluded gift.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be reported as long as it stays under that threshold per recipient. So practitioners are talking about monies that individual puts in those Trump accounts. They're not going to be excluded, those monies. So that's a little technical, caveat to consider while setting up those trust accounts. Okay. From the tax technical side of things. But a lot of people try and take advantage of tax strategies like bonus depreciation, which is, became permanent as a part of this big and beautiful bill.
Okay.
So that's a big one. Another one to name is 1202 gain exclusion. So that's another big one for high net worth individuals when they're trying to do their tax planning. 1202 is something to consider. There are a lot of good strategies that came out of that big and beautiful for sure. To name a few.
So you expect to see more of those, new laws to kind of generate.
Yeah. So the projection is that hopefully on average, when people file their tax return for tax year 2025, hopefully they should see some kind of a little bit more of tax benefit, if you will, versus before. But it's case by case.
Is that for people that are expecting refunds or all across the board?
Yeah, so it's all across because like if you under withheld your tax, let's say you're a wage person, you under withheld your tax through the year, even though your tax liability could be lower, but if you took a little less from your paycheck every time, you could still be owing tax. So like that's kind of, I can't say that only refund people can take advantage of that, but like typically, like for example, child tax credit was bumped up by a little bit. So if you have 3 kids, for example, so that number can add up. So those kind of things and details. Yeah.
Right. Well, we're about to dive into it. She's already given us some really good tips and information as far as the Big Beautiful Bill and some of the new things that are going to be coming out of that. So if you have questions, you're getting some forms that you're concerned about, obviously she's a great resource. And at the end of the show, stick around. We'll get all of her contact information so you'll know how to find her. How to set up a consultation if you want to meet with her and have her go over your tax situation. That way, you can be guided properly through this because obviously there's only so much we can touch on for tonight's show. And so the best thing to do obviously would be to follow up with Alena about your tax issues and anything that might come up out of tonight's show, right? Okay. So before we get into that, I want to make sure everyone knows how to continue to stream and be able to listen to tonight's show and also get your questions in if you have any that come up. So we do have our Facebook stream is up and running. We also have our YouTube stream that is up and running. So if you want to tune in, let's say you're listening to us now on the radio or some other way, but you want to continue to listen or go back and watch it later. We are streaming live right now in the WTAN studio, and you can watch that stream through our law firm YouTube or Facebook account. So if you search Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers on either YouTube or Facebook right now, you should be able to find the broadcast. There should be like a red circle around the logo. That means it's live. Click on that. You can see the show. You can see Alena and I right now. You can put your questions or comments in the chat portion of the live feed, and I will see them. We can read them and discuss them. Although I do personal injury law. So if you have a question about that, we can ask that tonight. But most of our topic is going to be surrounded all around tax tonight. With that being said, if you can't finish the whole show tonight, but you want to listen to it later, that's okay. We have a podcast as well. And so this show with Alena and I will also be on most podcast platforms. You'll be able to find it if you follow us on FLALAW on the radio. Look us up on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, just about most podcast platforms. If you just search FLALAW on the radio, follow us, you'll make sure you'll always get an alert when tonight's show gets uploaded. You can actually go back and listen to past shows that Alena has been with us on. She has covered so many great topics for tax law. So that's the best way to kind of go back and listen to past shows. If you're brave and you want to call in, you can absolutely do that as well. The call-in number for tonight is 727-441-3000. If you have a question for myself or Alena Miles, the best phone number to call in to the studio is 727-441-3000. And that way you can get your question answered live over the air. With that being said, let's dive into tonight's tax topics. The first one being, I understand that there has been a new change in the postal or postmarking law as far as your tax return. So we'll call it the mailbox rule, which can mean different things in the law. We have a civil rule about the mailbox rule, but this is pertaining to tax. And when the postmark is applied, the processing and deadline. So tell me about that so that everybody can understand what's the post office change in the mailbox rule now.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jacqueline. I don't think it's specifically IRS related. I think it applies to beyond that because it's a USPS rule.
Right.
But to break it down in simple terms, before December 2025, when you go to the office and you're trying to mail in your tax return, right? You're just dropping it off, or you go into the clerk and the clerk stamps it with the date.
Yeah.
And that's good enough to say that this return was mailed out on April 15th. For example, you did it on April 15th and it's timely. Okay, but now it's the rule has changed, and once again, this is beyond tax returns. This is beyond the IRS.
Yes,
it applies widely.
In
general, mm-hmm. Right? And so now, so it's not as simple as dropping it off. It's when the postal automated machine sorts through and accepts that you dropped it off.
Interesting.
Yep. So in there could be time lag.
I was just about to say
drop off. Mm-hmm.
Do you have an idea? Obviously, I could be putting on the spot, but the time frame that could take from the actual drop off to the time that it's processed?
No, I don't know that. However, the general recommendation is to be proactive. If you're specifically talking tax, if you're filing a tax return, or there are certain international tax forms that still have to be mailed out manually via mail versus e-filing, give yourself a couple of days at least to be timely, knowing that this rule has changed.
So there's still a lot of people who do manual paper filing.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, it's not only that. It's that for IRS purposes and from IRS standpoint, certain tax returns, like if you, let's say, have never filed 2020 tax return, I can't e-file it for you. The window of opportunity to e-file older returns is closed. So that could be relevant for that. But certain forms, international tax forms, they come with heavy penalties. So if you miss a couple of days because of this time lag in the postal rule, just be aware of that. Give yourself a couple of days at least to be on the safe side.
So in a situation like this, where we now have a little bit of lag in the time that it's being processed versus, actual postmark and such, this could create a major tax problem for someone who just drops it in the mail.
Yep. So the best way to go about it too is to use certified mail, USPS certified mail with a return receipt.
Yeah.
So when you fill out that green little form, you get your receipt that you paid and so on. Hopefully, keeping that receipt, uploading it. Let's say you're my client, you're uploading it to me. And keeping that receipt in case there is a problem 3 years from now, we have something to fall back on.
Right. And so this new post office rule really would not, or correct me if I'm wrong, it really would not apply to those that are e-filing, correct?
Yeah. If I e-file or somebody else e-files your tax return, then it's e-file. I always check if the return has been accepted, because if your return is rejected, then me e-filing it is no good for you. I have to make sure it's accepted. But once it's accepted by the IRS, you don't have to worry about this mailbox thing. Unless, once again, we're talking that you are selecting certain even current tax returns cannot be e-filed. There are some exceptions. So not everybody can e-file.
Okay.
I mean, it's better to e-file, of course.
Is it just because of the type of tax situation they have, or the forms that they're using?
It's rare, but it still can happen. So, yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So I feel like at this point, if you are in a situation where you do have to paper file, or, you are not able to e-file, and this mailbox rule has now changed, you really shouldn't be treating April 15th as the deadline. You should be moving that up a little bit, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. You got to be on the safe side when it comes to the IRS. So,
and to that point, when we do extensions, right? When you extend your tax return, I think I stressed it out before, and I'm stressing it out again, that extension is extension to file, not to pay your tax. So you can extend your tax return post April 15th. But if you're, for some reason, if you are mailing out a payment, okay, so, you cannot extend payment of tax. There is no such thing.
So that's something to keep in mind, because I obviously am not a tax attorney and am not versed in this, and that was news to me. I just assumed that the extension came with, I guess, a tolling or a delay of the payment as well. That does not mean that at all.
No.
You're just getting extension to file. So let's move on to another interesting topic. And again, I think this is probably news for a lot of people, but for those that are very much into gambling, casinos, and these sorts of things, they may already know this information, but I want to kind of jump into the topic about how taxes are handled for gambling winnings. So I assume that would not just be casinos, but the lotto, scratch offs, lotto tickets, Powerball, those sorts of things, right? So let's jump into that. Generally, how is that handled, and what applies?
And
we can also talk about non-U.S. residents as well.
So typically, you have to look whether this is trade or business, and see if you can deduct losses. So the question is, okay, I have gambling winnings. I know I have to report it. But the main issue is, can you offset gambling losses with gambling winnings? Okay. So that's where domestic people typically would struggle and try to understand the rules. Now, I'm not going to dive deep.
Let's back up that. So you have to keep track of your losses as well as your winnings? Is that how?
If you want to deduct your losses.
If you want to.
Yeah. I mean,
never thought about that. Never thought about that.
So it's kind of like, if I give you parallel example, let's say you're selling widgets, right? You're selling widgets, and
it sounds like a law school exam.
And you sold $10,000 worth of widgets.
Right.
Okay. Is that what you want to report on your tax return? Don't you have any expenses associated with buying your widgets, labor and stuff, and stuff like that? Okay, so are you telling me that you just want to report $10,000 and you don't have any deductions? Fine. So that's kind of parallel to gambling winnings.
Yes.
Do you have gambling losses, and can you deduct those losses?
Yeah.
So those are the two issues that you would have to look at to offset, in my example, that gross whatever you got from gambling. But like I do see a lot of non-residents, which means people from other countries.
They come here and win.
They don't, right? They either come here or they do online. I don't know, like how they go about all that. Like I'm not a gambler,
okay, so yeah, there's digital. There's so many apps these days. I don't know if you get bombarded with it sometimes, but I could be watching and here's a commercial for some app to gamble on your phone. Yeah.
But what happens is that if they win, okay, and let's say this is US based gambling, whatever. They're not gonna get. Let's make up an example. Let's say how much do they win, Jacqueline? Make up an example in dollars.
Let's say 100,000.
100,000. Okay. So they win $100,000, but they're not going to get $100,000. They're going to get $70,000
because of the taxes.
Because of the withholding tax that is being withheld on the front end. So $30,000 is being withheld.
Right.
So these people are saying, "Hey, I want to get my $30,000 back. How do I do that?"
I never knew that there was a way to do that. Do tell.
Yeah, there is a way. I mean, it's case by case.
And so, are we speaking internationally or domestically or both?
Yeah, so we're speaking. Technically, this is international because the person has to be, let's say, sitting in Mexico, resident of Russia, for example, or Belarus. I'm originally from Belarus, so let's make up that example. Belarusian person that is not a U.S. Resident, not a U.S. citizen, not U.S. Green card holder, is gambling, but like using whatever U.S. gambling facilities, either comes here or does it online. I don't know how the gambling side works. And they win $100,000 sitting in Mexico, for example.
Okay.
And they're not getting their $100,000. They're getting 70. And they're saying, I want my 30. Okay, I'm not a U.S. person. Why
are you dipping into my money?
Right,
yeah.
you just withheld $30,000 in our example. So, I see a lot of questions around that. And I mean, it's obviously case by case. You have to look and see whether they have any other U.S. sourced income. But there are ways potentially to, once again, the word is potentially, to get their money back.
So then... that makes sense, I guess, in my mind, if you're an international gambler. But let's just, for sake of conversation, for domestic gamblers, let's say you just go to Vegas and you win big, the taxes are withheld. Is there some sort of way to make that same claim as the international gamblers that, I shouldn't have to pay that full?
Yeah, typically the tax that I was talking about, withholding tax, it applies to foreign people. So it doesn't apply to domestic gamblers. In other words, they wouldn't have $30,000 withheld in our example. It's typically because the person is foreign.
Yes.
And the government has no way to find that Belarusian person in Mexico. How are they going to trace them? How are they going to find them, right? So they make the facility, for example, withhold the 30%, claw to that. So they don't have to chase that person. They just got 30%. But for domestic people who are, and domestic, by saying domestic, I mean, not only somebody who is U.S. citizen, U.S. resident, which means they have a green card, but it could be somebody who just changed visas, and it's very tricky and it's very complex. But if they stayed in the U.S. for so many days, you have to count the days, or if they changed one visa category to another, they could be considered U.S. tax resident, which is equivalent on tax side, equivalent to U.S. citizen and U.S. green card holder.
How would these gambling platforms or casinos know anything about their status?
They know. They know. Well, there is a way. So, like internally, there is Form W-8, Benny, or W-9 for domestic people. So, for example, if I'm a business and I want to pay you $700, for example, for whatever services. I'm going to ask you to fill out Form W-9, knowing that you're a domestic person.
Right.
So before I give you a payment, I'm supposed to ask you for the W-9 form.
I'm supposed to complete that first.
You're supposed to complete that. And if I give you more than $600, I'm supposed to issue 1099 miscellaneous to you, or 1099 NEC form at the end of the year.
That I do know.
Okay. So for international folks, there is equivalent to that. It's called W-8. And W-8 depends on whether it's individual, business. It gets more complex. But if it's an individual, it's W-8, I believe, Benny. So they have to fill out something like that. So to answer your question, I think the reason why they get that 30% withholding is because they fill out the W-8 form, and that's how they know that it is a foreign non-resident.
Okay. And so if that happens to be the case and someone's reaching out to you regarding this issue, what kinds of things or options can you offer to assist them with that?
So first of all, I am a certified acceptance agent, okay, which means that if you need a TIN number, like, so Jacqueline, you have social security number, I have social security number, but foreign non-residents, they do not have social security number. So they need some kind of a number, and it's called a TIN number to file a tax return. They cannot file a tax return without a TIN.
Yes.
Okay, so I can help them with obtaining their ITIN, being a certified acceptance agent.
Okay.
So that's one thing that I can help them with. And I can file 1040 NR, the non-resident return, for them to, let's say, get that $30,000 back, potentially
get some of that back.
Okay. So those are the things that they come to me for technically.
Got it. Are there any misconceptions that you think people have about their gambling winning and taxes when it comes to that?
You just have to look at the rules. If you are scared and afraid to deduct losses, you just have to make sure that you follow the tax law, you follow the rules, and take advantage of loss deductions that are available to you now. Remember, the tax law is complex. Domestic or international? International is very complex, but domestic rules are complex. If this is your hobby rules are different from trade or business rules. Yeah. Can you establish that whatever you're doing as a gambler is trade or business? There are a lot of questions there. So it's complex.
That sounds very complex, because how would you establish gambling as a business? Interesting.
It's factors. You have to look at the facts and circumstances. The facts and circumstances test.
Interesting. All right. Well, I have some questions, and it looks like an attorney, McKinley Justin, is asking about late tax returns. So give me a little bit more, McKinley, so I can make sure I ask the question properly. But it sounds like he has some questions about late tax returns. So if you give me a little bit more information, I can definitely ask Alena what you might need to know about late tax filings. So as far as going back to that gambling issue before we shift gears, this also applies to tourists too? Foreign, let's say international tourists that come, here and they just happen to play and win.
Let's say they're on like a tourist visa and they go and they're not a U.S. tax resident, meaning like they haven't been in the U.S. for so many days. You have to count the days. It's like an average mathematical formula. But let's say they do not meet that U.S. Tax resident test. Yeah, they're considered non-resident. So most likely than not, 30% withholding is going to apply to them if they win.
Okay. Well, good to know. I obviously am learning new things as we go throughout the show. I think it's a good time to take a short break. That way, if McKinley, you have a question that you want to ask specifically about late tax filings for Alena, you can do that on our short commercial break. And then when we come back, we'll try to get that question answered for you. We will take a short break. We will be back with tax attorney Alena Miles in just a moment.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
After a car accident, there are many questions that you need answers to. Who pays for my car repairs? Who pays for the medical bills? What about my lost wages? And more. The personal injury law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes has been answering these questions for their clients for nearly 70 years. Since 1955, they've been a voice of the injured in the legal system. As one of the longest established law firms in Tampa Bay, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes is here to answer your questions. Listen to their live call-in radio show on this channel every Tuesday evening from 5 to 6 p.m. or call them at 727-796-8282 or visit them at voiceoftheinjured.com. Offices Clearwater, non-attorney spokesperson.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
And we are back with FLALAW live on the radio. Hopefully you have been tuned in 6-5. We're here to 6, and we have tax attorney and CPA with us, Attorney Alena Miles, who has been going over some tax law information for you, also touching on foreign tax information. And I wanted to circle back to a question we had in the comments about late tax filings, late tax returns, and the options with that. So just to give a little bit of information, is there something you can touch on? This is coming from our real estate attorney in the comments here.
So first point on late tax filings or unfiled tax returns. If you never file your tax return, for example, you are keeping the window of opportunity for the IRS to go back and audit you unlimited. In other words, you never filed your tax return, so they can go back to your whatever year and audit you. You never filed your tax return, okay? If you file your tax return late, once again, you are basically extending that window of opportunity for them to audit you. So that's not good for you. That's point number one. And point number two is, let's say by April 15th, you owe a lot of taxes, okay? And you're scared. You're saying to yourself, oh my God, I want to hide. I don't want to file my tax return because IRS is going to see that I owe. Let's make up a number. How much?
Yes.
200,000?
200,000. Yeah, let's go with that.
Let's go with that. And you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm just not going to file a tax return, my tax return. That's not a good solution, because penalty on your tax is going to be much higher if you do not file your tax return. It's going to be less if you file your tax return. Now, remember, I told you can extend your tax return, but only the filing of your tax return.
Right.
But so if you do extend the filing of your tax return by October 15th, that's fine. But file your tax return by October 15th. But if you're never going to file and you owe that $200,000 in tax, your percentage penalty, the percentage that you use to calculate your penalty, is way higher versus if you file but show that you owe $200,000 and work out some kind of installment plan or find compromise, whatever that resolution is. But do file your tax return timely.
Absolutely. Now, I know you mentioned that there was a real estate topic that you want to touch on. Right?
Yes. So there is another international tax concept similar to what we talked about in terms of gambling, but it applies to real estate. It's called FIRPTA. So I do help taxpayers who assessed FIRPTA penalty, for example, to resolve the FIRPTA penalty. And that comes up in real estate. That comes up in real estate a lot. But that applies when the seller of real estate, and real estate is located, let's say, in Florida, so it doesn't have to be located somewhere else. But the seller of real estate is foreign person. And by saying foreign, I don't mean a dual citizen. I mean strictly person that is not U.S. citizen, not U.S. resident, not U.S. tax resident. So if the seller is foreign, buyer, the paradox of this rule is that buyer is responsible for penalty if FIRPTA doesn't go right.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And so again, you're talking things that I have no knowledge about, but hopefully the FIRPTA information was helpful for you, McKinley. He did mention something about 1031 exchange. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, 1031 exchange is another strategy in real estate that people utilize. And the biggest pitfall there is that as soon as you put your hands on the money when you do like-kind exchange, from tax standpoint, your like-kind exchange is blown. You have just blown your like-kind exchange. So you cannot put your hands on the money when you do like-kind exchange. That, I think, is the biggest pitfall. But it does get complicated when you have partnership owning the real estate and all that. All that stuff gets complicated.
It does get tricky. Now, I told you guys to wait to the end to get her contact information, but there's already been a question in the chat about your contact. So before we move on, just quickly tell people how they can contact you.
Yeah, thank you. So my phone number is 727-977-8270. And Attorney Legal PA is the name of the firm. It's located mainly in Safety Harbor, Florida, local. And Tax Attorney Legal, 3 words in one, taxattorneylegal.com is my website. Thank you.
Perfect. So hopefully that's been helpful. If you think of anything else as we continue to chat, feel free to drop a line. You can also call in. The number is 727-441-3000. So let's talk a little bit about digital assets, because that's kind of big right now. A lot of people are into crypto and various other digital coins and things of that nature. So again, not my forte. I don't know a whole lot about it. So let's talk about crypto. A lot of people think that, there's anonymous and things like that, but there's reporting and enforcement.
Yeah,
issues,
so
right?
there are a couple of new things and a couple of old things. Every individual tax return has a question. Did you sell, exchange, or whatever that question reads, digital assets in the year?
Okay.
So you diligently have to answer that question, yes or no. Okay. If you just bought crypto, most likely that question can be no if you never sold anything. So let's say you just bought crypto, didn't sell anything, didn't exchange anything. Okay, well, then it's probably a no. But you have to disclose that in that question. That question is not new. That question has been on 1040, which is individual tax return, for years.
Okay.
So if you haven't disclosed it properly, you should consider amending your tax returns and disclosing everything properly. Because you're signing your tax return under perjury. So
you're attesting that what's in there is accurate.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's and you cannot say that my account. I mean, obviously you can use it as some kind of excuse, but you cannot say I didn't realize something. No, you are the taxpayer. You're signing your tax return. Who you hired as an accountant or whatever is your responsibility to hire qualified professional to help you with the tax return. But it's you. You are ultimately responsible for your tax return.
Yeah, I think we hear that a lot in some high profile or celebrity tax cases where a lot of times they will point the finger at the tax professional, the CPA, or my accountant. I thought that they were paying my taxes properly, or they said that this, and I trusted them. Is that where that comes into play?
Yeah.
It's
So there is a case precedent where the taxpayer tried to shift responsibility on somebody else, prepare something, and that doesn't work. That doesn't work. You can try to ask for penalty abatement and state that the reason why there was whatever goof up is because of your whatever, if that's the case, your accountant or whoever. But the ultimate responsibility is with you, the taxpayer.
Absolutely. The buck stops there. So going back to crypto then, and digital assets, what type of transactions trigger reporting?
Yeah, so basically now, let me just answer it like in baby steps. But like now we have new form. It's called 1099-DA. It's relatively new. And that form is more rigorous reporting versus before. So the IRS wants to know more detail about your transactions, selling crypto, digital assets, and all that. There, I believe that, basis information is still not required to be reported. But with the time, I'm sure that basis information is going to be required to be reported on those 1099-DA forms. And then you use that 1099-DA form that you issue, just like any 1099 form, 1099-B, 1099 interest, INT form, DIV for dividends. You use it to report on your tax return. So hypothetically, let's say you file your tax, you listen to Alena's advice and filed your tax return on April 15th, timely. You didn't extend anything.
Or before that, if it's paper.
And then you
receive,
after that, you receive that 1099-DA and you're like, shoot,
yeah.
I did not include my digital assets transactions in my tax return. So you should consider amending your tax return.
Okay.
Yeah, but a copy of 1099-DA, just like a copy of any 1099, is also filed with the IRS, which means they have a record of it. So sooner or later, they will see the mismatch.
Gotcha. So it will come back. You shouldn't think that, oh, well, maybe they won't catch it. Yeah. Okay. So then I have a question, and then I'll go to that. What do you find is the most common mistake with digital assets? Because I could see, like you just mentioned, that people just don't consider it, or they don't admit that they've transacted with it, and they just kind of skip that question. What do you think is the most common thing that you're seeing with digital assets?
So I think there are two components to reporting that transaction, just like with stock, which is gross proceeds, how much you sold it for, and basis. Basis is how much you basically, in simple terms, not as simple, but in simple terms, how much you paid for it. And that's where it gets complex because you have multiple wallets.
Yeah.
Which Bitcoin out of which wallet did you sell?
Yeah.
And rules got more complicated. Rules got convoluted.
Yeah.
There was that safe harbor and all that, which is another internal compliance step. But ultimately, rules got more complicated, and you just have to make sure you're reporting correct basis. What if you took your Bitcoin out of one wallet, put it into the other, sold part of it? Like, it all gets very complex. So basis, I think, out of the two components, gross proceeds is going to be reported on that 1099 DA now. There is no way questioning that, right? But the basis piece is where, because like your gain or loss on sale of that Bitcoin, in my example, is gross proceeds minus basis. So one component is there. It's reported in 1099 DA. What about basis?
So is this really important if you're not selling, if you're just buying?
It is important because when you're buying, you also want to keep track of your basis, because when you do get to sell it, you're reporting the basis or adjusted basis. I don't want to get into complicated rules of basis.
We're already beyond complicated at this point. We have a question about SEC reporting.
Yeah, I don't do much with SEC reporting other than when you get your stock, like 1099, the big 1099 form where your sale of stock is reported. You just you just have to pick it up on your tax return. But I don't see much SEC related stuff.
Perfect. All right. So then that takes me to, we had some information that you learned at the conference about Italian tax resident investigations. What's going on with that? I feel like you said that there was some increased scrutiny going on of U.S. tax exposure, Italian tax residents. So what's the deal?
No, there was we just studied a little case about Italian.
Fancelli versus United States, right?
And there was another case. Let me just jump into, because I told you I'm originally from Belarus, and we studied a case, or touched based on a case where Ukrainian people came here, and they set up basically, you're not supposed to hire people without work authorization, and they created not a payroll company, but what is it, PE or whatever it's called, where they hired those people and provided that labor to hotels all around South Florida and Key West. And they got caught, and they got hit with heavy payroll tax, underpaid payroll tax, and all that. So just like with that Italian case and the case that I'm just talking through in general right now, it's once you get into international tax compliance, everything is super complex, super complicated, and you have to it's kind of like a bunch of laws marry with each other, even though immigration law, for example, is totally separate federal law, right? It's separate from tax law and immigration law are two separate things. So but it kind of you have to look at all of those things to see if you're in compliance. You have to obviously follow the law.
That bring up a good point, because I've been seeing a lot here lately of people who wrote remote work, but they live in other countries. They technically work for U.S.-based companies. They were U.S. residents who moved to other places, Thailand, Italy, and different things like that. How does that work? I mean, I assume that they still are expected to file U.S. tax returns. Are they going to also then be taxed by the government Italy, let's say let's use Italy, for example. Like, how do those kind of things work?
Yeah,
I've never considered the fact that.
so those rules are very, very complicated. But like, and once again, it's very complicated. But if I just like talk a little bit about what I know, okay. Sure. For example, I'm hiring a lady, and I'm gonna pick on Ukraine. In Ukraine, that does my video. Sure. The video things for me. Okay.
She creates some marketing videos.
She creates videos. That's all she does. It's like a project. She's not my employee. Like, I don't control her time and so on and so forth. But she only does specific project for me. So the first thing you would want to ask her is to provide that W-8 Benny for you. That's important. It's like that equivalent to W-9. We talked about that today. So that's the first step. And then you realize, okay, so she's a foreign person, right? And she's performing services for you. Once again, you have to look whether it's a service, what is it that you're paying for? I'm paying for a service by project, right? So where are the services performed? The services are performed offshore. So she's non-resident. She has nothing to do with US. And she's performing that service offshore. Okay, so she technically, not like I'm providing legal advice to a Ukrainian person, but technically US has no jurisdiction over that person because she's offshore and it's an independent contractor in this case. And the services are provided offshore. Okay. Right. So in that specific case, she doesn't have to file. Most likely than not, once again, this is not an absolute legal advice, but most likely than not, she's not required to file U.S. tax return. Now, if you slightly change a fact here or there a little bit, it could completely change the whole totally story, different. Especially once you talk companies, businesses. Yeah. It all gets more complicated.
Gotcha. Interesting. Because there's a very odd dynamic nowadays. We do a lot of transactions through remote work these days. Yeah. So, and I never considered the fact there's people living all over, and I don't know how that, tax implication applies.
But not only tax, and I'm not an immigration lawyer, but not only tax, but now like with immigration too, if somebody is employing somebody in an unauthorized way, there are huge penalties from that standpoint as well. That's outside of tax. So you have to want to make sure
business owners have to be very careful.
Very careful
with that. Interesting. Yep. Very, very interesting. So we have a few minutes left on the show. And one of the topics that you mentioned, I think is very good to kind of close out. But of course, if you want to touch on anything else, let me know. But you mentioned non-resident estates in Florida.
Yes.
Let's close out the show with that and give us some information about U.S. estate tax and probate exposure.
Yeah. So technically, like in general terms, if there is a non-resident, when I say a foreign person or non-resident, I don't mean dual citizen. I mean person that has nothing to do with the U.S., meaning like no green card, not a U.S. citizen, not a U.S. tax resident. And let's say that person has a home in Florida and, they die. So technically, once again, this is just a general example. Beneficiaries, U.S. beneficiaries, for example, want to access the assets of that deceased person. And they most likely than not, they wouldn't be able to do that without IRS's permission. So that's,
and why is that?
Well, because once again, this is like, okay, it's a non-resident. They want to make sure everything is taxed here.
Okay. That's what it all comes down to.
How are they going to chase? Once it's not here. So they want to make sure everything is taxed here. So that, and also foreign trust, not like I'm not by any means or anything. I'm not claiming to be an expert in foreign trust. It's very complicated. But the compliance that comes with those things is rigorous. You have to know what you're doing. You have to follow the rules. You have to understand that penalties are huge if you miss compliance with foreign trust. So estate, non-resident estate, foreign trust, all those things are super complex. And you should proceed with caution.
Yeah. So then what is kind of what the family's process if something like that happens? If, let's say, this non-resident foreign individuals passes away, and the property is here in the U.S., let's just say Florida. what do they do?
So you have multiple layers of complexities there, because one of the things that they probably want to do is sell that house.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Naturally.
Right. So when they sell a house, you think in FIRPTA. I'm thinking FIRPTA. And that's what I kind of briefly mentioned. Okay. If there is FIRPTA, there is 15% withholding on the gross selling price of the house. Gross selling price of the house. So that could be huge.
Yeah. You said 15%?
15%.
Wow, yeah.
So that's like withholding tax, so that could be a layer of complexity. Another layer of complexity is there could be like separate 706 NA, which is a state tax return that needs to be filed to get the exemption certificate from the IRS, so beneficiaries can get access to those assets. Okay. So that's another layer of complexity. And then let's say there is a non-resident person who is selling the house, then they might want to consider applying for I-10, filing 1040-NR to get the FIRPTA money back. So there are multiple layers of complicated stuff in a transaction like that. It's not easy. It's not simple.
It sounds like it could get very tricky. So good. So Attorney Justin definitely says he loves the explanations. Thank you. Yes, perfect. So I'm glad you're enjoying this show, McKinley. With that being said, since we are getting close to the end, are there any other takeaways that you want filers to know? We're in that time of year. It's that season. Just things that you just want people to be aware of right now as they're preparing their taxes, gathering their documents. Just one takeaway that you would give.
Yeah, so if you're facing some kind of tax problem, do not put it on the back. Just, attack it proactively.
Face it head on.
Exactly. That's perfectly said.
Yes. If I've learned anything from you, it doesn't get better by putting it off. It's like what we say about personal injury cases that go and they kind of just sit. It's not like wine. They don't get better with time. You have to act. You have to be proactive. You have to make sure you're managing it. So it sounds like a similar situation with your tax filings. Don't allow those to linger. So about tonight's show and the international tax, if we have anyone who maybe is a foreign individual and non-resident, is there any takeaway you have from them that you would say one of the important things that you learned maybe at the conference for tonight's show?
Yeah, just some of those for non-residents, some of those filings are manual, meaning like you have to manually send in those forms. You have to do things a little bit more manually with some international stuff, like applying for I-10 or whatnot. So just allow yourself some time and be proactive and just, once again, contact qualified professional, whoever that is, to to help you through.
That would
it's
be
all
you.
complicated.
You're allowed to plug yourself on the show. So good. So I hope that was a great show. McKinley said yes, that was helpful. So and McKinley, by the way, is a real estate attorney here locally. He has also been a guest on the show before.
Hey.
And so since he's watching, I'm going to pin him down that he'll be coming back soon. I'm going to reach out to get, he goes by the Mustang lawyer. He drives a Mustang. So we'll get the Mustang lawyer back on FLA Law on the radio. But in our last few minutes, give everyone your contact information. Again, I did promise that if they stuck around, that they would get that information. Socials, website, phone number, you give it all, please.
727-977-8270, Attorney Legal PA, located at 980 Main Street, Safety Harbor, Florida. www.taxattorneylegal.com. Miles@taxattorneylegal.com is my email. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm sure she'll be back again.
Yay.
Definitely reach out to her with any of your tax questions and concerns. Next week, we will have attorney April Goodwin, an animal law attorney, who will be coming to talk a little bit about dog bite litigation and some of the things that she handles. So tune in next Tuesday. We'll be back with FLA Law live on the radio. Thanks, Alena.
Yay. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Good night.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.